Coming up on this Friday edition of Daybreak, the European Central Bank takes out the bazooka with a massive stimulus package aimed at firing up the stagnant eurozone and warding off deflation. In a video message to the World Economic Forum in Davos, President Park Geun-hye calls for patience as North Korea appears in no hurry to come back to the negotiating table. Plus, with the deadline looming, Japan reiterates it will not pay a $200 million ransom for two of its citizens captured by Islamic State. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Friday, January 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. And we begin with news that the European Central Bank will inject a staggering 1.1 trillion euros, roughly $1.25 trillion US dollars, into financial markets over the next 18 months or so in a desperate attempt to stop the flagging eurozone shuddering to a halt. Speaking in Frankfurt on Thursday, ECB President Mario Draghi said the program of quantitative easing worth $68 billion US dollars a month is going to start in March and last until at least next September, or when inflation returns to near its 2% target. The announcement stunned traders, with most markets across Europe posting gains. The euro, however, slumped 2% to an 11-year low of $1.13 against the greenback. The ECB also says it's going to keep eurozone interest rates at 0.05%, a record low. President Park Geun-hye says South Korea will remain patient with North Korea as Seoul continues to wait for Pyongyang to come back to discussions aimed at easing tensions on the Korean peninsula. In a video message to hundreds of global CEOs at a Korea night function on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, the president said Seoul will patiently seek dialogue and cooperation with the North and will work to make unification a reality. Her latest comments come a matter of days after she asked the government to try and create the optimum conditions for North Korea to come forward for dialogue. On the economic front, President Park said the global economy needed to find new growth momentum, adding that she hoped the forum would come up with some productive measures. And Korea's Supreme Court has upheld a lower court ruling of 9 years in prison against former National Assembly Representative Lee Seok-gi of the now disbanded Unified Progressive Party for violating the country's national security law. Ji Myung-gil reports.
At the close of a 17-month trial, former Unified Progressive Party member Lee Seok-gi was found guilty of instigating a rebellion among members of a secretive pro-North Korea group called the Revolutionary Organization.
Defendant Lee Seok-gi is found to be guilty of instigating a rebellion among members of a shadowy pro-North Korea group. However, he is acquitted of conspiracy charges due to a lack of evidence.
Prosecutors alleged that Lee had discussed plans to blow up major facilities in South Korea last year, such as communication lines and railways, with 130 members of the underground group. The top court also found Lee guilty of sympathizing with North Korea, which is a violation of South Korea's national security law banning any anti-state activities. However, the court ruled that there was not enough evidence to prove that the revolutionary organization actually existed. The court said the evidence was solely based on the testimony of informants. Right after the ruling was issued, both the ruling's Haenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy said they respected the court's decision. However, the ruling party said Lee should have been found guilty of both sedition and conspiracy, while the opposition party said the court's decision should have come before a ruling last year that disbanded the Unified Progressive Party. Yi was a member of the UPP, which was indicted on charges of conspiring with members of the revolutionary organization. All 5 of the party's lawmakers, including Yi, lost their parliamentary seats last December when the party was dissolved. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now, as the days pass and evidence continues to drip out, it's seeming more and more likely that the young Korean man who went missing roughly 2 weeks ago on the Turkey-Syria border joined the extremist group Islamic State. There are growing concerns in Korea as well that as more information emerges, other disillusioned young Koreans might be tempted to head to the region as well. Kwon So-ah reports.
Social networking services like Twitter and Facebook helped the young Korean who went missing in Turkey nearly 2 weeks ago to learn about and possibly even join the Islamic State group. It may have all started as curiosity when the 18-year-old Kim typed in words like Islamic State, Islam, and Syria into a search engine. So the concern is that as easy as it was for Kim to just turn on the computer and type, for young Koreans, falling into the arms of terrorists could be just a few clicks away. Kim's Twitter has been attracting a lot of followers in recent days, raising a red flag for authorities.
These days, you just type in the words and it's easy to find information.
I'm pretty sure that the Korean teenagers, including the Kim boy, had no idea how violent the ISIS is and how gruesome they are and what the ISIS philosophy is, because
Dr. Chang says the IS has 2 main recruitment strategies. One is designed for hardcore devoted Muslims, the other targets those who seek money. She says it's highly likely that Korean teenagers are targeted as the IS knows there is high cyber penetration among the group, making them more vulnerable.
And I think there are very significant asymmetry within the Korean society. Unfortunately, our society, especially Korean media, are highly only focusing on the Korean Peninsula issue and Northeast security issue.
Experts say Korean society has to expand its perspective and awareness in order to provide young people with enough information on the truth about Islamic terrorist groups and be more vigilant about internet censorship. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, Korea's credit default risk has shot up to its highest level in 11 months, with growing uncertainties in the global financial market. Now, this may be a sign of Korea's still weak economic fundamentals, but experts say it's not all that. Our Hyundais has the details.
The cost of insuring the Korean government's debt has risen to an 11-month high as investors seek safer investment outlets. Data by market tracker Super Derivatives shows that the credit default swap premium for Korean foreign exchange stabilization bonds that mature in 5 years came to 67.96 basis points as of Monday. That marks a rise by almost 20 basis points in the past month. Experts attributed the soar to falling global oil prices and lingering uncertainties in financial markets across the world, especially in the Russian, Greek, and Swiss markets. They say such unstable conditions have prompted investors to look for risk-free assets by moving their money to countries like Japan. In fact, the spread on Japan's credit default swaps was lower than Korea at 63.89 basis points, about 4 basis points lower than Korea. But experts add that it's hard to say the rise in the premiums indicates Korea's economic fundamentals are worsening. They say a large part of the increase came from Korea Exim Bank issuing $2.2 billion in government bonds globally, which resulted in a rise in demand to hedge credit risks. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's largest automaker Hyundai Motor says its net profit tumbled 22% in the fourth quarter of last year. Hyundai also reported that net profits for the whole of last year came to $7 billion US. Seems pretty high, but it's actually down 15% on year and the lowest the Korean automaker has logged since 2010. The slumping profits came despite sales actually rising about 8% on year. Hyundai blamed the results on the strong Korean won and the extra incentives it gave US customers to boost its sales there. As for this year, Hyundai says it expects sales to grow a rather slow 1.8%. And Korea's Samsung Electronics has launched a budget-friendly addition to its popular Galaxy line of smartphones. It's called the A5, and while it's cheaper than Samsung's other smartphones, it still has that premium feel. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
The Galaxy A5, the latest addition to Samsung's lineup of low-end smartphones. You can pick one up for roughly $450. That's about 40% cheaper than Samsung's flagship S series. Despite its lower price, the model still boasts a full metal body and features a 5-megapixel camera and a 5-inch high-definition Super AMOLED display. And the sellers have high hopes.
The quality is pretty outstanding considering the price, and given the high price of other smartphones, including the Apple iPhone, we believe it will sell well.
But consumers, on the other hand, have mixed opinions.
I think low-end smartphones are cheap, obviously because they lack quality. It's not like something you use once, so I'm not really interested.
I'm interested in the new model. My phone bills are usually high, and with this phone, I can save a lot of money right off the bat because of the low price.
Samsung's move to diversify the price ranges of its smartphones comes amid its earnings concerns hurt by fierce competition from its rivals, such as Apple and Xiaomi. Its market share stood at 28% last year, down 4.5% from a year ago. It's still number one, but Chinese companies are catching up fast.
As high-end smartphones don't have many new features to offer now, and as the difference in quality between the two narrows, the low-end market will become the mainstream.
With that said, Samsung recently launched a new low-end smartphone in India that runs on its own operating system, Tizen. The Z1 model costs just 5,700 Indian rupees, or roughly $90. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, in the final part of our special series on startups in Korea, we meet with Lee Han-ju, founder of a global accelerator called Spark Labs. The company helps Korean startups go global by linking them with Silicon Valley while also providing funding, mentoring and office space. And so far, it has helped some 30 startups get off the ground. Our Lee Ji-yoon sat down with Lee Han-ju and asked him what he thinks the Korean government should do to better help the country's startups.
Korean economy has a long tradition of cooperation between the private sector and the government. In fact, a lot of the chaebols, if you look at their history, got their start because of the Korean government support. However, what I see is that there's not enough support yet towards the early stage startups. And early stage startups are probably the riskiest form of investments. But it must be done because that's where the innovation and that's where all the excitements and that's where the next 10 years of Korea will be defined by. I know the government is planning to do more. It's a matching program where private sector VCs like us make a selection and we say we're going to invest in this company and the government comes in and do a matching program. So it's a co-investment. So I think that's a great idea because the private sector guys are probably good at selecting the winning ideas, and the government can bring their muscle and actually help to accelerate that growth.
Then there must be some improvements that could be made, though, in the current system to better help startups. So what's your opinion on that?
Take one example of fintech. So fintech, it's a short for financial tech. Probably the most famous example of that is PayPal, or nowadays Alipay, or what you see with Apple 6, iPhone 6, with the Apple Pay, internet banking. A lot of that you don't see in Korea yet, and that's because of some of the financial regulations that are in place. But it's time to rethink those. Otherwise, Korea will be left behind. There's a huge revolution happening around the financial industry. Technology revolutionizing the way people pay, way people exchange money, and that's a big business. You know, financial industry is a huge business, and Korea should not be left behind simply because we cannot imagine how to redo the regulation. So I think Korea needs to become really, really aggressive in terms of redoing the regulation around financial industry so that we could also have innovations around fintech.
What advice do you have for future startups or for those considering to start one but really can't because they don't really have that courage?
Just do it. Having gone through all those thought processes, there comes a time when you have to pull the trigger. I think we as a society needs to take a risk. For example, I think Korean moms need to become a little bit more tolerant of their kids trying a startup. Working for big corporations is not the only way for your children to succeed. Becoming a doctor and lawyer is not the only way for your kids to succeed. In fact, they could make a big difference by starting a startup. So do it, take risk, but if you're going to do it with the right frame of mind.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following this Friday morning in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. New developments this morning. The president of Yemen has stepped down, effectively leaving a power vacuum in the country's leadership and the U.S. without a key ally in its fight against Islamic extremism. Yemeni officials said President Abed Rabo Mansour Hadi tendered his resignation after his prime minister and cabinet decided to step down. The development comes as talks apparently broke down between the Yemeni leader and the Houthi rebels, whose fighters did not appear to pull back from the presidential palace and residence, as had been agreed in a late-night tentative peace deal. In his resignation letter, the President Hadi said he had reached a deadlock with the Shiite militants, who reportedly pressured him to give a televised speech and ask for appointments in his government. The Yemeni parliament has yet to accept the president's resignation. National law would place the parliament speaker next in line to be president. The current speaker is widely believed to be allied with the Houthis, who are fiercely opposed to the U.S. and believed to be supported by Iran. Time is running out for Tokyo, which is grappling with how to free the 2 Japanese hostages being held by the Islamic State group. The Japanese government believes the 72-hour deadline given by the extremists is due to expire at 2:50 p.m. local time. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said all efforts were being made to save the hostages, but described the situation as difficult, adding that Tokyo had yet to make contact with the IS militants to confirm their safety. The Islamic State had demanded a $200 million ransom for the release of freelance journalist Kenji Goto and contractor Haruna Yukawa. The extremist group has previously killed 3 Americans and 2 Britons it featured in similar videos. U.S. President Barack Obama will not meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when he visits Washington in March to speak to Congress. The Israeli leader had been invited by House Speaker and Republican leader John Boehner in a move that the White House indicated it was blindsided by. President Obama, in his State of the Union address, had said he will veto any attempts to place new sanctions on Iran in light of ongoing nuclear talks against Israel's calls. The White House explained it was long-standing practice to not meet heads of state who are close to elections back at home. Israel will hold polls in mid-March. And finally, the World Health Organization says it is observing a turning point in the Ebola crisis, with the number of cases falling in the most hit West African countries of Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. In Liberia last week, it said observed only 8 new cases of the deadly virus, down from what was a weekly peak of 500 cases back in September. While urging caution, the UN body said the figures were the most promising since the start of the deadliest Ebola outbreak that has so far killed more than 8,600 people out of nearly 22,000 cases.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with our 2015 Asian Cup coverage. And of course, on Thursday, the undefeated Korean national football team looked to make it fourth straight heading into the quarterfinals against Uzbekistan. Now, of course, scoring problems continue for the Korean national team as they failed to score in the first 90 minutes of the match. But the Korean defense also shuts down Uzbekistan as the match goes into extra time, and there, 13 minutes into the extra time, sensational Son Heung-min heads one and giving Korea the 1-0 lead. Before this next play here, Cha Duri storming through the right side, unstoppable before passing it over to Son Heung-min for the double, as Korea wins this match 2-0 and advances to the semifinals. Now, many would agree that if there's one major league team that most Koreans love, it's the LA Dodgers. And now reports are coming out that a group of Koreans are planning to purchase a portion of the team. Now, with one of the owners putting up their 20% of the share for sale, a group of Koreans who call themselves Korea Consortium are looking into purchasing that 20%. With NBA legend Magic Johnson and the Guggenheim Group purchasing the Dodgers for $2.15 billion from Frank McCourt back in 2012, 20% of the share will come out to roughly $400 million, an amount the consortium has already made available. Of course, it's not the first time a Korean group has tried to purchase the team. Eland also tried to bid for the team back in 2012. Now, winter training is in full swing in the KBO, with all 10 KBO teams preparing for the 2015 season. But it's not just the players getting ready for the new season. The umpires are also busy with their winter training camp. Of course, one of the biggest controversies in the KBO in the past 2 seasons were all the blown calls, and that leading up to the introduction of video replays in order to prevent them from happening. And just last year, 40.8% of the calls were reversed after video replay, an alarming percentage. So while the players are training overseas, the umpires are holding their own winter camp in Icheon as they hope to lower the percentage to under 40% in 2015. Now, if you're a fan of volleyball here in the nation, you're probably enjoying one of the most exciting seasons in the recent memory. Well, that's because going into the All-Star break this weekend, the competition has been intense both in the men's and women's V-League. Now, with the All-Star game set to take place on the 25th so far, both leagues are seeing quite the parity in the league standing as the Samsung Hwajae Blue Fangs are no longer dominating the men's league with a slim 7-point lead over OK Savings Bank, and KEPCO, Korean Air, and Hyundai Capital all fighting for third place. Meanwhile, over on the women's league, an even tighter race as Korea Expressway, Hyundai Hill State, and IBK all in arm's reach of each other in the league standings. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. A brisk morning we are waking up to, and unseasonably mild winter weather continues today in much of the peninsula, and highs will be about 2 to 4 degrees higher than what we would normally see at this time of the year, and good air quality will create conditions favorable on this last day of the work week. And finally, we could get to bask under lots of sunshine. Mostly sunny skies will be featured throughout the day across the nation, but this morning is slightly cooler than yesterday. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the morning low here in Seoul is kicking off at -4, then the daytime high later on will peak at 5, while Daegu and Gwangju should rise to 8, and Busan will top out at 9. And as for the other regions, it looks like Jeju Island should see a high of 9, while Daejeon and Dokdo climbs to 6 and 3, respectively. Now, relatively mild winter weather should continue through the weekend, but there's a slim chance of rain on Sunday afternoon. That's all for the weather. Back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Thank you very much, Jiyeon, for the weather. And that's going to do it for now. Korea Today is coming up at the top of the hour. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a fabulous weekend. Goodbye.